1. I've been binge reading stories with a friend. My friend reminds me of two things that happened during my employment with the same employer. She said I really need to share with you all. Backstory. I first started working for the employer as part of the manufacturing department, specifically cutting 12-foot shelves to other specified lengths per order. The wet shelving that you see in new homes and apartments is the type of material I worked with. The only reason I got the job was that during the working interview I cut and finished nearly 1,500 feet in 8 hours. Apparently the guy before me could and would never cut more than 800 feet per day. After I finished each order, I had to clear it from the computer's database. This is important for the second story. Within a couple of months, I finally managed to get my heavy-duty forklift operator's license. That way I could do all the shuffling around of product as it came in from the supplier. A full shipment would be close to 1,000 packs, with each pack weighing around 300 pounds. So enter the incident number 1. The day was shipment day, a Monday. It had to be one of the largest shipments the company has ever received. 3 semis loaded to the brim with 1,000 packs each. My boss said that I would need to not only unload all of it without help, but I would need to cut all the orders for the next day, since I cut a day or two ahead. At the time, I didn't think it would be a problem since by now I was cutting close to 2,500 feet in 4 hours. Turns out I was a bit wrong. The owner of the company had parked his car in the area where the overflow of material is stored, and under no circumstances am I allowed to place it anywhere else, according to the owner. I thought I would let my employer know that his car was parked in the storage area and needed to be moved with the big shipment coming in. He looked at me with the deer-in-the-headlights look and said, "Make it work somehow. I have a new client coming in and I will be out with him most of the day." At first I thought of arguing the safety issues. Then I remembered how angry I got when I was refused a 50-cent raise based on my production totals. I looked at him and told him good luck with the potential client, and went to prepare for the arrival of the shipment. I started up the forklift and slipped the carpet-covered forks on. These were used to keep from scratching the material if a box was ripped during shipment. I gently slipped the forks under the chassis of his BMW and lifted the car to the back of the storage area, without setting off the car alarm. When the shipment arrived, I unloaded as I normally do. Since this was such a large order, 2/3 of the total was placed in the large storage area, in front of his car. By the time the end of shift came, I had all my work done for the day and went home. It was around 9 p.m. that night. I received a call from my employer asking where his car was. He hit the ceiling when I told him, and he asked why I did it. "Because you told me to make it work, and that was the only way it was going to work. I'll go get it tomorrow." He couldn't argue with that, as he refused to pay any overtime to anyone at that time. Incident number 2. By the time this happened, I had been working there for about 18 months. But with my employer knowing the amount I was able to cut in 4 hours now, he decided to allow me to deliver the orders as well. I say allow because I had a CDL and was able to legally drive the company truck much of the time. I was traveling 200 to 300 miles from the shop, which in turn was giving me 10 to 16-hour days, 5 days a week. Yep, that awesome overtime. During the last 2 months at this time, I had been asking for another raise, since I was now driving a large delivery truck, which required a CDL to drive. Every other day for 2 months, I had been asking him about the raise. Every time I asked, his answer was, "I don't have time right now. Catch me later." Until one morning I was told by his secretary that his schedule was clear, and he would be in at 10 to check on things. By 10:01 I was at his door asking about the raise again. He gave me the same old reply. I said that we needed to talk now about it. He just tilted his head to one side and said, "I pay you to unload shipments, cut orders, and deliver them. So if you have no shipments and no deliveries, clear the orders then." So I walked back to my work area with a shit-eating grin on my face. Once back in my work area, I go stand at the computer. I am clicking the clear button on every single order. There were probably 2,500 future orders in the computer at the time. Orders that haven't been cut yet. After standing there for nearly 90 minutes, all the orders were cleared. Once an order is cleared, it is marked as finished in the system. Once all cleared, I grabbed all my belongings, that I kept there and placed it all in my car. I then went to his office, asked him if there were no shipments or deliveries needing done and the computer was cleared, if I could go home for the day. He told me to have a great rest of my day. I knew that he would do his late-night walkthrough before turning the alarm on and leaving that night. I made sure to leave the little work light on, shining on a signed note saying, "I quit." A couple days later, he called me asking where all the orders that were marked as finished were. I reminded him that he had told me to clear the orders that day. I told him that he didn't mention anything about actually cutting the orders. The last thing I said to him was that calling me anymore would be considered harassment, as I no longer worked for him. Found out that he lost a lot of business over the 3 months following because of the confusion and lack of actual completed orders. All I was asking for was a $2 raise, which could have put me at $17.50 an hour, because I was driving with a CDL and delivering orders on top of what I was actually hired to do. 2. So just for a bit of context, my mum and dad own a plant nursery. From what I was told, our annoying neighbor was a retired lawyer with too much time on his hands. And he lived just down the hill from us and owned a dam as well. So let's get into this. This happened a few years ago, when I was in year 11 of my high school, about mid-autumn. Keep in mind this is Australia, so it's bloody dry. We get a formal complaint from our annoying neighbor. This isn't a big shock because at this stage we were getting formal complaints from him every 2 weeks or so. Anything from too much noise to, yes, too little noise. Our dog, our hill eroding, anything this guy could think of. It came in his usual lawyer-style letters. Anyway, this guy had written us a letter claiming we had infected his water with blue-green algae, and that we would have to pay all damages to his property, including vet bills for his horses. Now, my mum and dad were furious with this guy, for when we were having our dam built, this guy kept complaining about how the runoff from our pots would change the nutrient level in the water. So when Dad built this, he went all out. He had a natural filtration system with 2 smaller dams that all the water would go through first, filled with natural water filter plants, reeds and other plants. Then it would go through a chlorinator, and finally a pumped filter. Every month Dad would wash back mains into the dam to keep the dam the right pH, and pump the water constantly to keep it aerated. So my parents replied a flat no. So our neighbor makes his biggest mistake and calls Melbourne Water to look at our dam and to test the water, and guess who had to pay for the water testing fee? So Melbourne Water guy gets there and is quite pissed, for his co-worker called in sick, and he is going to have to collect water samples from all water inflows and overflows, and the dam itself by himself, do salinity tests, pH tests, and send samples back to the lab for further testing. I thought it was interesting, for I was doing chemistry at the time, so I went out to talk to him about it. He looks at our setup and, to say the least, was pretty impressed. He asks why it was getting reviewed. 1, due to how dry it is and how water isn't overflowing from our dam to his, and 2, why is it the neighbor getting reviewed due to this isn't the one with blue-green algae? He soon gets explained all the shit our neighbor gives us and expresses his sympathy. When he is about to finish up, he suddenly asks about the fence line that goes through the annoying neighbor's dam, and I tell him about a few years back the neighbor had told us to reinstall our connecting fence in order to keep our dog in and how Dad had to pay for it all. Dad was pissed and decided to review our property border, and didn't give up a centimeter of land to this guy, even if it went through his dam. A Melbourne Water guy smiles and says, "Well, I'll have to get a sample of that as well, won't I? Since it's your water." After this, he talks to my parents about our options and says that the review will be scheduled soon about the water contamination. By the way, I was not present for the meeting. Mum and Dad relayed the whole thing to me. Anyway, going on. About a month later, the council had us sit down for a meeting with annoying neighbor there, and all he knew about it was about contamination of water, and he is looking smug. Then it starts. Melbourne Water guy goes on to state that the contamination did not come from our dam, and likely came from annoying neighbor's horse poo runoff into his dam. But without further testing on annoying neighbor's property, there would be no conclusive evidence. Annoying neighbor just looks confused because why have the council meeting for this? But Melbourne Water guy isn't done yet. He then goes to state that there has been, in fact, contamination to our water from his, and we have a cubic meter of water coming across from his dam. I heard he just went pale as he realized what this meant for him. He would have to pay us for damage. He quickly got composure and claimed,
"They do not use that cubic meter of water and therefore do not have damage."
It was my mum's turn now. She got up and told the council she wanted to use this water for a water exhibit for our plants range, for when customers came over to look at our plants, but could not do so with the water contaminated. The council had already seen the plans and agreed, so the annoying neighbor was then forced to pay for Melbourne water to come out and determine where the contamination was, and then set up a filtration system similar to ours, which cost Dad about $20,000 to decontaminate the water so we could do our water garden. 3. When I started working for a local council IT support desk in 2005, the standard operating procedure for answering calls is that when the phone rang, we take the user details, their fault description, and attempt to fix the issue. This went on for 6 years until we had a new manager, with several innovative ideas which we all knew was not going to work in our particular environment. New manager calls a meeting with the entire team, including his own manager and the head of IT. He lays out the new rules and procedures. We stated that his procedures were not going to work because of various other protocols and the distance between sites. No one in authority listened to our concerns. 2 main policies that were divided into 3 shifts: morning shift 7 to 3, day shift 9 to 5, late shift 2 till 10. And that only the day shift is supposed to spend time fixing the more complex issues. Morning shift and late shift are simply call takers. Call takers had 2 minutes per call, and any breach was brought up at your monthly review. Of all the new policies, the 2 minutes per call rule was the worst. Not only did we have a mere 2 minutes to take a call, we had to attempt some troubleshooting and write up all the notes. If this was a new employee, we also had to add their details onto the system. Being the most senior support person on the team, I made a mental list of what I could do in that 2 minutes. It was a small list, but it meant that when the first shift started at 7 a.m., most of the important work could be done. Malicious Compliance 1. After a month, the department was in chaos because we could only work 2 minutes before handing it off to the day shift. There were a lot of calls for the 3 day shift workers to attempt to fix. The outstanding queue went from 100 calls to nearly 2,000 in that month. I maximized my time on every call. If I couldn't fix the call, I would make sure that every call would take just under the 2 minute mark. Then dumped them in the day shift call queue. Dropped calls, people who called and hung up, increased drastically. And one of the team went on long-term sick due to stress. Eventually the boss decided to come in early to see what the problem was. He sees me and another tech taking calls and stands over us while we work through the calls. We both take less than 2 minutes per call and follow his rules to the letter. He has no reason to complain, but sees that the calls are dropping. With 2 people taking calls 2 minutes per call and a peak of 30 calls around 8:30 time, mean that lots of these calls drop then call back later. Later in the shift I see him checking call stats and see his face get red. He knows that his policy is not working. Malicious Compliance 2. The following day, boss calls us all in the meeting room and states that we must work harder or smarter. He tells us that we need to use the on-site support team to handle the logged calls instead of the day shift. We still had the 2 minute rule and the same staffing levels. I mentioned a couple of times that VIPs couldn't wait, and that we need 4 people taking calls from 8 a.m. I was told that the rule still stood. The day after, and we found out that the on-site support have no free slots for over a week, which is 3 times shorter than the day shift's waiting times. Boss is in, and instead of logging onto the phone, he's simply floating around. As 8:30 rolls around, I answer yet another call. This is a VIP, the chief executive. He's in a meeting room 70 miles away attempting to turn on his laptop, but he can't get past the encryption software. It's an easy fix, but takes 10 minutes over the phone. I can't do it because of the 2 minute rule. I'm torn between dropping the calls or annoying the chief executive. Boss sees me hesitate and asks what's going on. Laptop encryption. He's in. The boss shuts me down. Hand it off the desktop. I told him that they wouldn't be able to get out for over a week and that the day shift could fix it. But this is stopping him from working.
Day shift is too busy, I don't care who it is, hand the call off,
he told me before walking off. I took the details and told the chief executive that I'd have to hand the call off. Made the notes on the call and gave the incident reference. I realized that I hadn't told him who it was, but he could get this information easily. I also saved and replayed the recorded conversation to find that my boss could be heard clearly. After lunch, I was called into the office of the head of IT. He chewed me out for leaving the chief executive without anything to present the council's vision of the future for the distant town. I was told that the chief executive wants someone's head, metaphorically, for the treatment, and that formal proceedings has started and I was suspended on full pay. And did I have anything to add? I told the head of IT that my boss had told me to do it, and when I started to explain about it, he walked away. I also told him that if he pulled my phone log for that call, he could hear the boss saying that. I was told to stay in that office while the head of IT checked. An hour later, I was told to go home on full pay and return in the morning. The result was that the new boss was replaced, fired, and a new boss was placed there, promoted internally, actually listened to his staff and let us suggest improvements. 4. So about 3 years ago, I was asked by a friend Ash to help out a wheelchair-bound disabled chap called Gary, who wanted to go swimming but none of his care staff, apart from my friend, were willing to take him. I agreed because I've worked in care at all levels previously, so I was fine with helping a chap out. I was there a month or so before they asked if I was willing to take on actual shifts there. I was so started very part-time initially. The shifts were a waking night and sleep from 11 till 12 the next day, and a single 4-hour shift between 3 and 7 p.m. I was given a couple of day shifts and I was tasked with picking up any shifts because of holidays or illness by other staff members. He had 4 other staff, my friend Ash, a dude called Jake, one called Craig, and the most problematic Lisa. Lisa picked up 1 sleep per week and a couple of day shifts. The problem is that she was a raging alcoholic who just didn't come to work if she wanted to go out drinking instead. Gary, disabled chap, fancied her a bit, and she was very touchy-feely with him, I think, to manipulate him as he's very lonely. Jake wouldn't work a weekend and would only do 2 sleeps, plus Jake didn't like doing any housework, and he didn't like doing personal care because he thought it was gross. Craig would only work 3 sleeps and never a day shift. He didn't believe he should have to do any housework at all, and wouldn't even make a bed. Things were changed in the scheme to suit Craig. Hoovers had to be emptied and cleaned every time you used it. No sheets were kept on the carer's bed as Craig didn't think he should change them. Gary had to be put in PJs by the day staff as Craig didn't want to do that either. Again, like I say, nobody was willing to take Gary swimming, and now I knew why. Please just allow yourself a moment to understand that 2 staff members had to be at least 65% of the allotted hours, but would not do any housework or personal care. Craig has also worked this job for a decade and made at least £1,800 every month without fail, without having to do any work, and for half the week, he just has entire days to do nothing. Easy money. These 3 staff members are seemingly bulletproof, and nothing they do gets them dismissed. Lisa had at this point been suspended 3 times during my tenure for being drunk and abusive on duty. At one point she was suspended for 10 weeks while they let everything blow over. So I get taken on mainly to make up for the fact that his mother is off on the sick, as she has had surgery on her knee. But after about a year or so, I became aware that his mother is being paid a full wage every month, but without statutory sick pay being noted on her payslip. I immediately know what's up. Gary's mother is in control of his account that the local authority pays money into, and he then pays his care staff from. I also found out that Gary is also using his account to fund his lifestyle, including adult chat rooms, clothes, and gifts for his staff. He's quite blatant about it, laughs about it often. I find this really galling because I pay tax to my local authority every month, like every family in the UK, and that pays for everything in my area, including social care. So I report this to the local authority and get absolutely no joy. Very disappointed in this, I decide to continue working there but save all the evidence I can for the future. I also convinced him to keep a handover book for the staff to note what their activities were that day, so anyone curious can track what things staff are and aren't doing. Anyway, up until last week I was working for him about 30 hours a week and handling a lot of the day-to-day problems. But I get a text from his mother saying she is returning to work the following week, so my services will be reduced to a single 4-hour shift once a fortnight. I said thank you but no thank you, and I worked to my final paycheck and called it quits. Now, as a last-ditch attempt to get someone to listen, I sent a lengthy email to the emergency care team at the adult care service, where I detailed absolutely everything. I got interest, and today somebody came out to interview me. They were incredibly interested in what I had to say and confirmed my initial email kickstarted an investigation into Gary's situation. They told me that they had been building a case against this for a while, and that it stretches back the entire 20 years he had been able to pay for his own care. I had documented that his mother had paid herself for working 9 hours every Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday for every month that I had worked there. She had submitted timesheets herself to the local authority that documented this. She had also submitted the timesheets to the council that showed the same days that she was apparently working. She had arranged for other staff to work them, namely me and 2 others. She had also sent messages to me that documented her communicating with me to continue to cover her shifts. The handover book documented what had been done that day. She never wrote in it, obviously. Medication charts at the property documented who gave him the medication that day. She never signed it. So yesterday morning, Gary and his mother were called to the council to explain to them why his entire contingency fund was gone. This was meant to pay for sick pay, maternity pay, and any other unforeseen monetary problems he may encounter. There was nothing left. Gary admitted some guilt and cut them a check for £5,000 on the spot. This money was something he came into recently after his grandfather had died. That was a humongous admission of guilt. Then, when the social worker met Gary at his address yesterday, and after some probing, he admitted that yes, he was aware of the conspiracy that he and his mother operated, and yes, he was paying her a full wage every month, knowing that she was not working. Again, jackpot for that social worker and an even bigger admission of guilt. This social worker was then meant to interview the mother, but at that point she knew it was knowingly criminal, and that he and his mother had entered a criminal conspiracy to defraud the council over a potential 20-year period, to the tune of £250,000 at least. She contacted the police and let them arrest the mother and interview her. I was told I will be contacted in due course to be interviewed by the police, as would all other staff. I was also told Gary would no longer be in control of his staffing at all, and there is no way that the other staff members would be taken on by the care organization that would have to be brought in to run his care. The only other person that would interview for his position would be my buddy Ash, and he had a faultless record. I'm jobless at the moment, but hey, I take a foreign holiday next week, and I'll put in the groundwork to get a new job for when I arrive home. 5. To start, this is not malicious compliance against the Japanese police, as it is against a customer from hell. Oh, and if the police are called to a dispute, they won't take sides unless a law is being broken in front of them. That is for the courts to sort out. They just keep the peace, talk to the 2 parties, and try to work things out. On to the story. In 2008, I was a club owner in Japan. I rented the place from a rascally old man who let me do pretty much what I wanted. The club had a motorized mirror ball hanging from the ceiling, a pool table, a projector. They're left over from the former renters that the landlord said I was free to use. I made a lot of money using the downtime. The club is usually wasted space during the day, setting up party space type events after weddings, reunions, and the like. The tables would disappear at night, and you have a dance floor. One party got a little rowdy, and during the festivities, the crazy host lady thought it was a good idea to pick up a chair and swing it over her head. Don't ask me why, she was very drunk. The arc of the swing launched the mirror ball into the air, smashing it to the floor in 1,000 shiny pieces. After my staff cleaned up the broken glass, she promised to pay for it, and I thought that was that. Jumped online, found a like model on Amazon Japan, and added the price to their bill. I don't remember the price, but being motorized put it past $100, with non-motorized versions selling for much less. About 3 hours after, a very angry host lady's husband shows up, receipt in hand, saying I scammed the drunk host lady and he was going to call the police and shut me down and rabble. Our back and forth went on for quite a bit, and honestly I was getting a bit tired of his macho in-your-face attitude. He then said he would also talk to my landlord and get me evicted. I was at the eye-rolling stage and sarcastically said, "Oh, don't get him involved. You will regret making him mad." Unfortunately, sarcasm doesn't translate well in Japanese, and he jumped on my humor gaffe to say I was threatening his life and called the cops. The cops were totally professional, but a bit overzealous in responding to the call. 3 patrol cars and 2 bikes showed up. I guess the guy made it out like I was in league with the mob, and I guess Gaijin and Yakuza in the 2000s equals overkill. They listened to us together, then they separated us and got each side of the story. Then, just to be sure, the police talking to each of us switched places and asked all over again the same questions. Slowly the cars one by one went back to work, leaving only 2 motorcycle cops with us in a back and forth argument, all very tedious. Finally, one of the cops pulled me aside and said, "Look, he is willing to pay for the damage, but only if you apologize for threatening his life." Being American, where we see lawsuits everywhere, I was very reluctant to say such a thing. So I walked back to the man and the police and I asked everyone, if I apologize for him getting frightened, this whole business is done. Angry man has his arms crossed with a macho, smug, "yeah bitch, say you're sorry" look on his face. The 2 policemen are also waiting for me to speak. I am really sorry. Really, so sorry you get scared so easily. Had I known, implying your weakness, I would have chosen my words more carefully. Damn if extremely polite Japanese can turn into a slap in the face. Dude turns beet red, and I swear to you, the policeman on the left let his guard down just enough to let the corners of his mouth twitch into a grin. Just for a moment. Then the policeman said, "He did as you asked. Now time to go home." And they herded him to his car. 6. So for reference, I have low iron plus vitamin D deficiency. And side effects from both mean I'm always fatigued. Now what happened to me was in the semi-start of puberty. You know, when you've been through it for like a year, but you still don't have a clue what the fuck is happening to your body. So, yeah. Now we start our story. I was quite a bright kid when it came to math, because my brain always worked well with logic shit, I guess. I was, for the most part of my school life, top sets in my band, which is actually quite good looking back. But then the minor health problems kick in, both physical and mental, and my mother starts to get worried when I come home from school and sleep from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. every night. A few blood tests and doctor's visits later, and bam! We receive the conclusion, so we inform the school. And they agree that it can be added as medical and I can't be penalized for it. Again, great. Except for one teacher. My math teacher. I had never failed her class, but I always had minimal work in my books, and most of that was half-drunkenly scribbled on the page. This is when she starts to dislike me. She would always pick on me to answer questions, and if I fell asleep in her class, she would slam a textbook on my desk and then belittle me for falling asleep, and send me out into the corridor for being defiant. To be honest, she should have seen that something was definitely wrong when, most of the time, she would find me asleep in the corridor, but oh well. This ended in multiple detentions each week, which I never went to. So one day she sends me out, but this time I stay awake. She's ranting on and on about how me falling asleep is being defiant, and how I would amount to nothing more in my life if I didn't learn how to take orders. She was the only teacher I ever had problems with. And if I didn't pass maths, I passed all my math tests with flying colors, and that's all we were really ranked on. I told her that I can't control what's happening to me. And if she was a better teacher, she would see that something is definitely wrong with my health. And if her lessons weren't so boring, then maybe I could stay awake. And then she said the most beautiful line in the world. "If you have a problem with my teaching, then take it up with the head." I simply smiled and said okay. When the day ended, I called my mother and I told her what had happened. She scheduled an emergency meeting with my head teacher regarding my health and education. I also requested to have all my math lessons in the library. Already not looking good for the bitch. So the meeting rolls around, and this teacher is looking very smug with her little notes, and my mother has fire in her eyes. We get into this meeting and she immediately goes in saying I am disrespectful and defiant of her classroom rules, and that I purposely ignore her and pretend to sleep. She says other things, but I'm already not listening. And then it's our time to speak. My mother says, "So you say my daughter is disrespectful to you, but you have been the only one to ever approach me and say that. Not only that, but you have been the only teacher to say that about my child also." "Well, I don't believe that would be possible. She shows very defiant behavior in class. Even when I send her out, she would sleep outside the classroom."
Wait a minute, so you're telling me that she would sleep outside your classroom door on an uncomfortable and cold floor, and you never thought to once call her mother about it, or maybe tell someone higher than you to help her?
She was only doing it to laugh in my face about the rules.
Actually, she did it because of her medical reason that we were sent in an email months ago. You either decided to ignore what was said or not read the email.
Well, I didn't receive this email, but I will take this into consideration next time I teach her. My mother says, "Actually, no, you won't. I've had my daughter come home and cry to me saying she doesn't want to come to this school anymore, and that she feels like she's less than every time she walks through the door. She was fine about the school until she started your class, so this is me formally asking that she's moved to a different class entirely."
Oh, P, is this true?
Well, normally when I get sent out, she would come and find me on the floor, and she would shout at me and tell me that it would be nothing in life when I grow up. Enter the waterworks. The worst part is that some of the kids in that class would bully me because they could hear everything that she would say and then make fun of me for it. Harder waterworks. Teacher, scared head teacher, furious mother, Victoria's Hotel, Travago. The head assured me that I would be moving to a different class, but until then, I would still study in the library. I said it was fine, and then I finally had peace. My mother said she wanted an investigation launched into this teacher. Did I mention that I dropped a few other incidents with other pupils? Because what she was doing could have very bad long-term effects on a child's mental health. They apparently actually did. She got demoted, kind of. She was still head of maths, but she wasn't allowed to teach students. Basically, all she did was grade things and act like an IV. Then Holy Grail fell into my lap a year after. She was highly advised to take early retirement as to not shame herself and the school because of her behavior. But after all this time, I thank her. Because if she had never told me to take it up with the head, I would never have thought about it. 7. I work in a call center, which supports a major UK internet service provider. We'll call it ISP for Internet Service Provider. It is one of the companies which rent the British Telecom phone lines in order to supply their customers with landline phones and broadband connection, aka internet connection through the phone line, supplying 20th century speeds for 21st century demands. I won't go into all the technicalities, but for most of our customers we still provide the old ADSL broadband. We used to have a number of systems which allowed us to troubleshoot the lines and get all the information we needed, such as Line Management, LMA, Internet Session Manager, ISM, Wireless Tool, Wi-Fit, Fiber Cable Link, FCL, Service Problem Manager, SPM, etc. All those programs use different abbreviations, but I use these for security purposes. We used these systems on a daily basis until September 2017, when the company launched a new experimental AI to run diagnostics. It integrates only the necessary for basic troubleshooting information from the upper-mentioned systems, and it focuses on time management and fast solutions, and provides us with a ready solution. We call the AI HAL. HAL is a step in the right direction, but it is not a real person and far dumber than its grandson, the 9000 version, so it often gives us stupid solutions for simple problems. Runs a broadband test for a landline issue. For no dial tone, it asks to replace the router, gives resolved on a line with 30+ connection drops in 12 hours, and a landline more crackly than a Geiger counter at Chernobyl, etc., etc. As if the creators purposely entered a sarcasm code into its brain, but I digress. For the less experienced of my colleagues, an override is provided by their line manager, and they do whatever the manager says. But I have been there for years, and I know the side systems well enough to explore all the nuts and bolts and actually locate the problem, even if Hal told me something was right. Thus, I used Hal for the first 2 minutes of my conversations, and then I relied on LMA, ISM, and FCL, for they always give me more information. I often got chewed by managers for spending too much time on individual cases, but I always got great reviews by the customers, so the managers often neglected that. That was until ISP started shutting down most of the side systems, using the excuse that they were to be integrated into HAL. We kept most of the major ones like LMA and ISM, which were our bread and butter when it comes to stability and speed, until recently when ISP stopped LMA as well. No longer could we troubleshoot the ADSL broadband because we had to rely on HAL, which showed us no line retrains, no errors, no chances to stabilize the lines, no checks for outages. Basically, it took away all microscopes from a bacteria research lab. All of us agents were angry. The more experienced were really pissed. But we got told from management, "You don't get paid to think. Use HAL, it's perfect!" Time had passed. We now had only half of the original site systems, and HAL barely improved. It was more difficult to troubleshoot problems, and customers became less and less satisfied. No longer was I able to resolve 30% of the issues on the phone. We had to book engineers. This wasted time and money. I spoke to my manager multiple times. He said, "Submit your ideas via email, we'll look over them and report back." I submitted a very long email, showing my concerns about HAL, stating that HAL was incompetent, and we needed alternatives. Give ideas, even long-term solutions, which would also cut down the engineers we send and save ISP a hefty amount of money per year. But as you know, nobody likes a smartass. When leadership in the corporate world sees a good idea, they often shut it down, mostly out of envy and fear that their position might be taken away by a person from the bottom of the food chain, only because this person has a little ingenuity. Shortly after my idea submission, I entered a room with 2 of my line managers and an operations manager, stating that I took too much liberty in pointing fingers and that I need to know my place in the company. I then asked the following questions. Well, what if HAL stops working? What are we going to do then? HAL is perfect. It is designed to work even when other systems don't. You don't need to worry. If it goes down, it will get back up in a few hours. Trust in HAL. HAL knows best. Nobody pays you to think about these things. Well, are we here to blindly follow a flawed system, or are we here to provide a good customer service? I'm here for the customer, and I help them in any way I can, because they don't care about our systems. They need a solution ASAP. You're wasting too much time on individual cases. You don't follow the process. It is made this way because it works. If you don't like it, look for another job. Well, guess what happened a few months ago? HAL stopped working due to unknown cause. HAL no longer ran landline nor broadband diagnostics. It always came out with errors, everywhere, on everyone. And even better, we had knowledge of a major outage in one of the more populated areas of the UK, affecting tens of thousands of customers. The side systems that would allow us to see if there was an outage were gone in favor of HAL. HAL was not working. Everyone went crazy. Cue the malicious compliance. Realizing HAL was not working, I responded every time with, "We have technical difficulties. We were told it would take a few hours. Please call us later." Then again, and again, and again. No troubleshooting, no checks. The same sentence over and over again. A BS excuse, then another and another. The customer protested, but I couldn't care less because when I had before suggested to use alternatives, it had always backfired with the same responses. Trust in HAL, and HAL we trust. HAL is our Lord and Savior. So I acted accordingly. The only successful calls were the transfers to the other departments. I didn't do a single case of troubleshooting for 3 days, because HAL didn't work for 4, 3 of which I was at work. I was actually smiling, for the call duration was only a few minutes and I took a bunch of them, which lowered my average call time and I was looking good, statistically. That was until the manager started listening to the calls. They do it to assess us. So yours truly was put once again in the same room with the 2 line managers and the operations manager.
What are you doing?
What do you mean?
When Hal was not working, you didn't do anything. No troubleshooting, no line checks, no manager approaches. You dodged every call that came to you.
Well, Hal was not working. What was I supposed to do?
Use the side systems, check your alternatives. Use your brain for once.
I tried using my brain. I tried helping the customer in any way I could. I went above and beyond before, and what for? To get yelled at for thinking and acting like a human being, and not a mindless tech support. For my work, I got yelled at and reminded where I am in the food chain. You told me in this very room to follow procedure, to do what Hal tells me. Hal was not working, therefore I couldn't work. You told me to trust Hal. It gave me an error and no solution. If Hal gave me no solution as per process, I had no solution for the customer.
You are exaggerating the truth. You are again overly dramatic about it.
I am not. I am here to do my job, and my job is to provide good customer service regardless of which systems I use.
It's not working this way.
Yes, it is. My math teacher told me that a single problem has a single solution, and 100 paths to reach it. Here it is, the same case. I take different approaches, but the end result is the same. The issue is resolved, and the customer is happy. Can we agree on that? The managers reluctantly agreed. They never bothered me again on what systems I used. Still, more and more the site systems got shut down, forcing me to rely only on Hal. I am now in the process of quitting my job, because I am tired of dealing with a flawed system and spineless managers who follow their bosses like sheep. I tried applying for a manager's position myself, but I got rejected every time, stating I was too rebellious, and I never followed the right procedure. Therefore, I was setting a bad example. So I decided to go back to my studies and graduate to become a merchant mariner, and travel the world while these bosses broil in their pettiness. 8. I grew up in a small community on an island off the coast of a thriving metropolitan area. It had its ups and downs, but was generally a pretty quiet sort of life. The community had a fairly large immigrant population from various European countries, and one of those was, well, let's call him John. John the Builder. He and his numerous brothers had all moved to the island together and started a construction company. John was a big, affable man, easygoing and always smiling. He spoke excellent English but with a thick accent. Sometimes people assumed his accent meant his grasp of business was lacking, but usually not for long. Within a decade or so of moving there, John and his brothers were pretty much the only builders of note on the island, and anything bigger than a garden shed would go through them. Around that time, my granddad retired and moved to the island with my grandma. He contracted John to help him build his retirement house, and they bonded over their mutual appreciation of a really good concrete mix and pour. By then, John's family were good friends of ours too, so John and my granddad kept in touch regularly, and would often get into involved discussions of building methods and the like. Some years later, the old couple running the main petrol station in town decided to sell up and retire, and the place was bought by Big Fuel Co. Big Fuel Co. decided the quaint old station and garage was in dire need of a complete makeover and modernization, and drew up plans accordingly. After putting the work out for tender, they grudgingly accepted that with the cost of relocating a labor force from the mainland to the island for the work, John's construction firm was by far the most cost-effective. They weren't happy about it, though, and made it clear that they thought John and his brothers were a bunch of rural cowboys who couldn't be trusted to nail 2 planks together. Still, the contracts were signed and the blueprints delivered to John. As well as the usual amenities, the new station was to have a high, artistically stylish roof over the fuel pumps, held up by 2 support pillars, you know the sort of thing. John read the plans, thought about the stiff sea breezes the location was subject to, and frowned. He took the blueprints around to my granddad and discussed them. Possibly not entirely within the bounds of the contract, but John was concerned. The next day, John rang Big Fuel Co.'s contact and said in his thick accent, "This roof isn't going to stand up. The support pillar footings are too shallow, and the roof itself is too large for pillars of that size. Plus, you haven't factored in the strength of the winds we get here. Everything else is fine, but you need to redesign that roof." "Rubbish," scoffed the Big Fuel Co. guy. "We had it designed by a very exclusive architect, and our engineer signed off on it. It's fine. You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe," said John, "but I've been building here for 20 years, and I think you should go over the design again." "Don't be ridiculous. You're just trying to get the contract extended. We don't need to check the design, now get the building." Click. John, being the genuinely nice bloke, thought that maybe this was just one person being difficult, and also felt that this sort of thing should probably be in writing, sat down and wrote a clear letter expressing his concerns about the fuel pump shelter, and sent it overnight to the Big Fuel Co. office on the mainland. The next day he got a call from the Big Fuel Co. office, from someone further up the ranks. "What the hell is this? Who do you think you are, trying to tell our architects and engineers they don't know what they're doing? You're only the builder. What the hell do you know? Just build the damn thing." "Could you put that in writing, please?" asked John. This is the point at which a sensible manager would be given pause. When the contractor specifically asks for it in writing, you should probably ask why. "Fine," snarls the Big Fuel Co. guy, and faxes through a terse note that he read the letter and considered it mistaken, and to get on with the construction. John shrugged, carefully filed the note, and went ahead with the build. A little over a month later, the new station was finished, roof and all. On a pleasant, gusty day, perfect for sailing, the Big Fuel Co. bigwigs flew over to see the result. Standing there with John and a curious crowd of locals, they watched as the shiny new stylish roof danced and swayed in the wind, in a manner decidedly unlikely to reassure anyone thinking of refueling their car underneath it. "What the fuck is this?" inquired the Big Fuel Co. boss. "Just what I tried to warn you about," replied John. "Bullshit. You fucked up the construction and now you're trying to pin it on us. We're not paying for this. You're going to need to tear it down at your expense and build it right. It's built exactly to your blueprints. If you want it rebuilt, you'll have to pay for it, preferably with a new design." "Not a chance. This is on you. And if you try to dodge responsibility for it, we'll sue." "Sounds good," said John. "See you in court." So the fuel station was cordoned off, and legal proceedings went ahead. I don't know much about them, but at some point I do know something like this happened.
"Defense, you may call your first expert witness."
"Thank you, Your Honor. We call Professor Thorne's granddad, internationally recognized civil engineer, who chaired the report into the bridge collapse and was head of engineering at, Floopy-Doop University for 25 years. Big Fuel Co.'s legal team lets out a collective, Thank you for joining us, Professor. Would you please tell the court how you first learned of the project in question?" "Of course. John first approached me with his concerns directly after receiving the blueprints. I agreed with his assessment, and I have since drawn up a brief report on the problems of the roof design. The details and supporting calculations are in pages 4 through 16, but if you don't mind, I'll just read from the summary. I noted the following problems." At this point, Big Fuel Co.'s legal team was thinking something along the lines of, "Oh shit." What with that and the note John had, it didn't take long to be settled. Big Fuel Co. was on the hook for all of it, plus legal fees. They had to pay John to tear down the unstable roof and build a new one, designed by a different architect and checked by off-site engineers. Nonetheless, when John got the new plans, he rang Big Fuel Co. and said, "Hope you don't mind, I'm just going to run these past the professor before we get started." The office I used to work at was located right next to a grocery store. This place was a popular lunch destination for people that worked in this building because it had a lot of quick options for lunch. Also worth mentioning, I worked with a great team. We got along great, would have no problem backing each other up, helping each other out with difficult issues, bringing stuff up for the team, doing favors, and so on. Because I was usually one of the first ones in, I was typically the first to take my lunch, unless I got stuck on a major shitshow of an issue. So typically, before I left, I would ask my nearby colleagues, "Hey, I'm heading next door to the store. Do you need me to grab anything for you?" Periodically, one or two of my colleagues would ask me to grab something when I asked, and would give me some cash or their card to buy what they requested. We all had a great working relationship, and they knew I wasn't going to do anything untoward with their card or cash. It was no trouble for me because I was going anyway, and I usually came right back with my lunch and ate in the break room or at my desk. One of my colleagues, let's call him Daniel, had a usual request: bananas. This request was usually honored without incident. During one such lunch trip, I headed over to the produce department to the usual large display of bananas they have, but this time, I spotted something on the top shelf of the display that I had never noticed before. Or the store had just started stocking. Red bananas. I never knew that red bananas were a thing, so I had no advanced knowledge of what these looked like inside or tasted like. All I saw were these maroon-colored bananas. I saw a sign for the red bananas, but I didn't see a price. I got an idea. I grabbed a bunch of conventional yellow bananas for my colleague and broke off one of the red bananas from the bunch I saw, not knowing how much they cost. I thought it would be a bad idea to buy a whole bunch, especially with someone else's money. I paid for the yellow bananas with the cash that Daniel gave me. I used my card to buy the red banana and ate my lunch. But I stuck the red banana in the bag with Daniel's lunch of yellow bananas. It turned out to be a good idea that I only bought one red banana because they rang up at $1.50 a pound, and the yellow ones were probably 30 cents a pound. So after getting back to the office, I put the bag of bananas on Daniel's desk along with his change. He thanked me and I headed back to my desk. I sent an IM to a couple of my other colleagues. I bought and stashed a red banana in Daniel's bag. Let's see how long it takes for him to notice. About an hour later, I heard an exclamation from Daniel's desk.
"What the hell?"
He held up the odd-colored banana. I told him while laughing, "It's a red banana!" It was pretty quiet work-wise, so our small team all converged around this red banana in amazement and amusement. I did let Daniel know that I paid for it myself because it turned out to be far more expensive than the normal ones. Someone asked the important question: how do we know if it's ripe? None of us had an immediate answer. A Google search told us that they're a dark maroon when they're ripe, so we thought it was okay. Daniel was not up for taste testing this variation of his favorite fruit. Another colleague, let's call him Andrew, decided to give it a go. He tried to peel it and couldn't break the skin with his fingers. He used a plastic knife to nick the skin and tried again to peel it. The layers of skin separated with the inner half of the skin still on the banana. We saw that the inside skin was a mix of white, green, and the maroon from the outside of the banana. The green didn't bode well, but there was no stopping after committing to this expedition. Andrew worked at this banana persistently for a few minutes, and finally managed to get 1.5 inches of the white fruit exposed. It looked like any normal banana. After all that work to get a little bit of fruit out from under the skin and completely undeterred by the previous struggle, Andrew took a bite. There was a very loud crunch followed by a surprised groan from Andrew. We all cracked up laughing. Never have I heard a banana crunch like that, not even with dried banana chips. It sounded like he bit into a large, hard candy. It was a wonder that Andrew didn't crack a tooth on it. Suffice it to say, definitely not ripe. So there you have it. That's how a request for bananas turned into a hilarious break from office monotony. I did troll Daniel a few more times with requests for bananas, but this was probably the best one. Thanks for listening. 10. Okay, to give some backstory to this, when I was younger I used to work as a starter and ranger for a golf course. The starter job is making sure people's tee times were kept, and the flow of people was on steady. The ranger was making sure people are playing swiftly and also enforcing course rules. I sit in a shack near the clubhouse until I get a complaint most of the time. So I get some complaints on our blue course that there are some people drinking and generally being loud and obnoxious during the course of play. So I get in the ranger's golf cart and I eventually come upon these guys. I happen to notice 3 things. 1, they are just leaving their empty beer cans on the ground. 2, these guys opted for golf carts for their playthrough. And 3, they had a cooler on the course. 2 course rule violations and 1 state rule violation. So I come to this group and it has 3 people in it. I ask them kindly, would you please refrain from drinking on the golf course, it's against our rules. One of the people starts laughing at me and takes one of their half-full cans of beer and throws it at me, and they scurry off in their cart. Now for the revenge. They were already on the 7th hole of blue, and I did remember letting one of those guys on with a red to blue 18 rotation. We have 27 holes with 9 holes each, red, blue, gold courses. So I decided to tail back and follow them out to see what cars they were in when they packed their gear up. I do this and get the model, make, and license plate number of the car. Here is your kicker. Across the street from our course is a county sheriff, and I happen to have his home phone number. He happens to play golf here a lot, and he gave me his number in case of issues. Well, this is an issue, and I call him and relay what I saw and tell him the info I got. Thankfully, these asshats went into the clubhouse to eat lunch before leaving, so it gave plenty of time to get the sheriff to wait. So they get done eating, and I decide to go wait near the entrance to watch the fun go down. Lo and behold, the sheriff was there in his driveway, ready to pounce. And here comes our asshats driving out. They go left, which is the exact direction of the sheriff, and boom! Flashing lights, and they thankfully pull over. The dude that threw the can at me was the driver, so I just start watching some more, and the sheriff starts administering the tests he does for sobriety. He fails on one, and like a dumbass he consents to the blow test. I don't know what he blew, but it was enough that he turned around and arrested, and then he saw me. Me in my golf cart, waving at him with a giant smartass grin on my face. Don't drink and drive, and don't fuck with people who enforce rules on a golf course. Some extra details. This was in the era where cell phones were not a big thing, so 99 to 2004-ish. I worked there in my late teens to early 20s. This course is in the more rural part of my state and is family-run and owned. Edit. Okay. I now know the laws on drunk driving and breathalyzers. It is still illegal to drive any motor vehicle under the influence. Also, let me explain a few things. This is what I was told at the time the rules were. I was told that it was a state rule not to drink and operate a golf cart. The coolers on alcohol on course was our rule because you had an option of taking a cart or walking the course. Sometimes the cans and glass get left on the course and tend to screw up our maintenance equipment. You know, fairway moors and rough and the like. I know a lot of places do allow this, but ours didn't. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to the Revenge's Ice Cream Archives, episode 14. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Sorry about the delay in between episodes. If you weren't listening week to week, then that won't matter. There was a delay. Don't worry about it. Having some health issues, I wasn't quite in the mood to do additional work that week, but feeling a little better now, so we're back at it. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so through the Hellfreezer Patreon. You don't have to, but it is there if you'd like to. And beyond me going ouch, ouch, ouch with every step I took the past few weeks, it's been fairly dull, I think, which isn't a bad thing. You want things to get too exciting. It has been very clammy around here of late, so I've had the fans going extra hard. They've been earning their keep, those fans. The kind that blow, not the other kind. Well, I suppose in certain circles. You know what? Let's not go down that road. The kind that spin around and keep you cool, which is always good. Of course, the hot weather is for me always an excuse to eat more ice cream. I do have a tub in the freezer. Mint Ben & Jerry's, Mint Wonderland. Anyway, I'll go think about that, and I'll let you folks get on with your lives. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.